A 60-year-old woman walked into a high school library wearing battle-worn fatigues. To the arrogant principal, she was a disruption breaking the rules. To the students, a walking joke. They had no idea who she really was. The automatic doors of Lincoln High School hissed open, admitting a figure who seemed to belong to a different era. Eleanor Vance, 60 years old, walked with a quiet purpose that her battle-worn fatigues only amplified. The olive-drab fabric was faded to a soft, mossy green, softened by countless washes and years of history. It hung loosely on her lean frame, yet she wore it not as a costume, but as a second skin. Her silver-white hair was pulled back in a simple, neat bun, and her face, a roadmap of fine lines, held a calm, steady gaze that took in everything without lingering. She was the new library volunteer, a fact that had been a minor point of interest for a day or two before fading into the background noise of high school life. But today, her choice of attire ripped her from the background and thrust her onto center stage. The first wave of reactions was digital and discreet. In the sunlit atrium, a student with expertly applied eyeliner and a bored expression nudged her friend. Her phone was already angled perfectly, the screen capturing Eleanor's slow, deliberate walk towards the library. Within seconds, the image was live, tagged with hashtag Sergeant Granny and a caption, "Lost on her way to the VFW? LOL." The whispers followed, a rustle of adolescent judgment. They weren't loud or overtly cruel, but they were constant, a cloud of gnats buzzing around her. She heard snippets as she passed clusters of students by the lockers. "Is that for a history project? My grandpa has pajamas like that. It's kind of sad, actually." Eleanor felt the stares like a physical weight on her shoulders, the same shoulders that had once carried a PRC-77 radio through miles of unforgiving jungle. She adjusted the strap of the simple canvas tote bag she carried, her knuckles white for a moment. Her inner voice, a calm and disciplined commander that had seen her through far worse, gave a simple order: hold the line. This isn't about them. And it wasn't. Today was October 23rd, 30 years ago. On this very date, she had been huddled in a muddy trench, the air thick with the smell of cordite and monsoon rain, listening to the final, frantic breaths of men she considered brothers. This uniform, this worn-out piece of her past, was the only tangible thing that connected her to them. It was a memorial service of one, a silent promise that they were not forgotten. She didn't expect these children, with their lives full of ephemeral digital dramas and fleeting social anxieties, to understand the weight of real-world sacrifice. She only hoped for the quiet anonymity to observe her private ritual in peace. It was a hope that was about to be systematically dismantled. Principal Davison's office was the architectural opposite of Eleanor Vance. It was a sterile, glass-walled cube of minimalist design, furnished with chrome and white leather. Davison himself, a man in his late 30s with a slick haircut and an expensive watch, saw Lincoln High not as a place of learning, but as a brand to be managed. And Eleanor's fatigues were a serious threat to that brand. He had seen the posts on the school's social media feed before his first espresso of the morning was even finished. He'd watched her on the security cameras, a relic of a forgotten time walking through his pristine, modern hallways. It was an anomaly that had to be corrected. "Eleanor, have a seat," he said, gesturing to a chair that was more art than furniture. His tone was a carefully crafted blend of concern and authority. "We're so grateful for the time you volunteer here. The students really benefit from your presence." Eleanor sat, her back straight, her hands resting calmly in her lap. She said nothing, her silence a stark contrast to the nervous energy radiating from the man across the desk. "Look," he began, leaning forward and steepling his fingers. "I need to talk to you about your attire. Here at Lincoln, we cultivate an environment of professionalism. We have a dress code for our students, and we expect our staff and volunteers to model that behavior." He paused, letting the implication hang in the air-conditioned silence. "My clothes are clean and functional, Principal Davison," Eleanor stated, her voice even. "Yes, but they're unconventional," he countered, searching for the right word. "They're distracting. We have students to consider." An outfit like that, it can be, well, it's inappropriate for a school setting. It sends a confusing message. The word inappropriate struck Eleanor like a physical blow. This uniform, which she had earned the right to wear through blood, sweat, and a terror he could never comprehend, was being dismissed as a fashion faux pas by a man whose greatest battle was likely fought over budget allocations. "I need you to go home and change into something more suitable," Davison concluded, his voice firming up as he reached his objective. "Otherwise, I'm afraid we'll have to suspend your volunteer privileges. We have an image to maintain." For a long moment, Eleanor looked at him. She saw not a villain, but something far more common, a man blinded by his own narrow definition of success and order. He saw a problem to be managed, not a person with a history. "I understand," she said, the two words carrying the weight of a surrender she hadn't felt in decades. She stood, her movements precise, and walked out of the glass cube, leaving Principal Davison feeling satisfied that he had efficiently handled another disruption to his perfectly curated world. Wordlessly, Eleanor returned to the library. The sight of her emerging from the principal's office was all the confirmation the student body needed. The old woman in the army clothes had been officially reprimanded. The unspoken message was clear: she was fair game. The atmosphere in the library, usually a sanctuary of quiet study, had shifted. The whispers were bolder now, the glances less furtive. She tried to lose herself in her work, the familiar, methodical task of shelving books. The Dewey Decimal System was a comfort, a world of logic and order that made sense. That's when Kyle saw his opportunity. Kyle was a senior who thrived on the kind of low-stakes chaos that made him a legend in his own friend group. Seeing Eleanor, looking so defeated and out of place, was a temptation he couldn't resist. He swaggered over to the returns cart, grabbing a large, luridly purple smoothie he'd been nursing. As Eleanor reached up to slide a copy of The Great Gatsby into its slot on a high shelf, Kyle made his move. He feigned a dramatic stumble, his arms flailing wildly. The purple smoothie left his hand in a perfect arc, splattering across a row of pristine, hardbound classics and drenching the sleeve of Eleanor's fatigues. "Whoa! Oh, man, I'm so sorry," he exclaimed, his voice dripping with false sincerity. A few of his friends, positioned nearby, snickered. Eleanor stood frozen for a second, the cold, sticky liquid seeping through the worn fabric onto her skin. She looked at the mess, the vibrant purple staining the pages of American literature. Kyle leaned in close, pretending to help, and dropped his voice to a conspiratorial whisper, just loud enough for his audience to hear. "Careful, Grandma. Wouldn't want you to have a battlefield flashback." The word flashback was a poison dart, aimed with devastating precision. The snickers from his friends erupted into full-blown, albeit suppressed, laughter. They saw a joke. They had no concept of the sleepless nights, the cold sweats, the faces that haunted the quiet moments of her life. They had taken a sacred wound and turned it into a punchline. With hands that trembled almost imperceptibly, Eleanor reached for a roll of paper towels behind the circulation desk. She began to blot at the books, her movements slow and deliberate. She didn't look at Kyle. She didn't acknowledge his friends. She simply cleaned, absorbing the humiliation into the vast, silent reservoir of pain she had carried for 30 years. To them, she was a joke. An old woman in a silly costume. And in that moment, under the fluorescent lights of the library, surrounded by the laughter of children she had sworn an oath to protect, Eleanor Vance felt utterly and completely alone. It began as a tremor, a low-frequency hum that vibrated up through the soles of her sensible shoes. At first, Eleanor dismissed it as a passing truck or a problem with the school's aging HVAC system. But it didn't fade. It grew. The hum became a rumble, then a deep, percussive roar that seemed to come from the very bones of the earth. The library windows began to rattle in their frames. A pencil rolled off a desk. In the hallway, a car alarm on a teacher's sedan was triggered into a frantic, useless shriek. The students looked up from their phones, their expressions shifting from bored indifference to confusion, then to alarm. The laughter died in their throats. This was not a familiar sound. This was a sound of immense, overwhelming power. The roar intensified, swallowing all other noise. It was a physical presence now, pressing in on the building, shaking the foundations. Then, a shadow fell over the school. A vast, dark shape passed over the library's skylights, plunging the room into a momentary twilight. Everyone rushed to the windows. What they saw defied all logic of a normal Tuesday at a suburban high school. A UH-60 Black Hawk helicopter, its olive-drab hull a shade darker than Eleanor's own fatigues, was hovering over the school. Its rotors churned the air into a violent, visible vortex, whipping the leaves on the quad into a frenzy. The machine was a breathtaking beast of steel and raw power, an emissary from a world of conflict and consequence that had just invaded their peaceful campus. In his office, Principal Davison stared, his mouth agape, as the multi-million-dollar piece of military hardware banked sharply and began a controlled descent toward the football field. His phone was already pressed to his ear, his voice frantic. "Yes, 911. I have an unauthorized aircraft landing at Lincoln High. I don't know. Just get someone here." The Black Hawk settled onto the 50-yard line with a grace that belied its size. Its engines began to wind down, but the sheer presence of it held the entire school population in a state of stunned silence. The students and faculty who had poured out of the building stood frozen, their phones held up not in mockery, but in utter, disbelieving awe. This was no longer a joke. This was an event. And in the quiet of the library, Eleanor Vance closed her eyes. She didn't need to see it. She knew that sound. It was the sound of angels and demons, the sound of rescue and of final goodbyes. And she knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that it was here for her. The school's PA system crackled to life, cutting through the stunned silence. Principal Davison's voice, usually so smooth and confident, was now thin and reedy, laced with panic. Will Ms. Eleanor Vance please report to the football field? I repeat, will Ms. Eleanor Vance please report to the football field immediately? The announcement acted like an electric shock. 1,000 heads turned as one, searching. The collective gaze of the entire school settled on the library doors. Who was Eleanor Vance? The question rippled through the crowd, until the answer dawned with sickening clarity: the old woman. The one in the army clothes. When Eleanor pushed open the library doors and stepped into the main hallway, the crowd parted for her like the Red Sea. The students who had been whispering and laughing just an hour before now stared in slack-jawed silence. Kyle, the boy with the purple smoothie, looked like he had seen a ghost. Principal Davison, standing near the main entrance, his face the color of ash, looked like he was the ghost. She walked not with arrogance, but with the same quiet dignity she had carried all day. Her combat boots, which had seemed so out of place on the polished linoleum, now struck a rhythm of purpose and authority. As she stepped out into the bright afternoon sun, she saw him. A man was walking from the helicopter to meet her. He was tall and broad-shouldered, his own dress uniform adorned with the single, gleaming star of a brigadier general on each shoulder. He moved with an unmistakable air of command. He met her halfway across the field. In front of nearly 2,000 students and staff, he stopped and rendered a salute so sharp and precise it could have cut glass. An aide quickly set up a portable microphone. The general's voice, calm and powerful, boomed across the silent field. "Students and faculty of Lincoln High," he began. 30 years ago today, a small unit of Army Rangers was pinned down in a valley, cut off, and facing annihilation. Their communications were down, and their situation was hopeless. He paused, his eyes scanning the crowd before landing on Eleanor. Their communications specialist, a young corporal, left the relative safety of her cover under heavy enemy fire. For 3 hours, while bullets tore up the ground around her, she worked to repair a damaged radio antenna. She was wounded twice, but she did not stop. She re-established communication. She called in the air support that saved the lives of 17 American soldiers. A collective gasp went through the crowd. This wasn't a history lesson. This was happening now. That communication specialist, the general's voice grew louder, filled with a profound respect, was Corporal Eleanor Vance. He turned to her. Today, on the anniversary of that battle, the United States Army is here to honor her. We are here to remember the fallen, and to pay tribute to a hero who walks among you. He took a step back as two soldiers in dress uniform approached. One carried a triangular wooden case containing a perfectly folded American flag. The other held a smaller, velvet-lined box. This flag, the general announced, his voice thick with emotion, flew over the Pentagon this morning in honor of you and your unit. We want you to have it. He presented the flag to Eleanor. She took it, her trembling hands cradling it as if it were a newborn child. And this, the general continued, taking the smaller box, is a replacement for something you were awarded long ago, but which we know was lost. We felt it should be returned to you today. He opened the box. Inside, resting on a bed of blue velvet, was the Silver Star, the United States Armed Forces' third highest military decoration for valor in combat. The sunlight caught the metal, and it seemed to blaze with an inner fire. The general carefully pinned it to the worn fabric of her fatigues, just above the pocket. Then he looked her in the eye and whispered, for her alone, "It's good to see you, Elle. They're all proud of you." Tears streamed freely down Eleanor's weathered cheeks. She stood straighter, her shoulders squared, and as the general stepped back and saluted her once more, she raised her hand to her brow and returned it. A perfect, unwavering salute from a soldier to her brother in arms. For a moment, there was absolute silence. Then, the applause began. It wasn't the polite clapping of a school assembly. It was a thunderous, rolling wave of sound, a roar of gratitude, of awe, of shame, and of profound, newly discovered respect. As the applause slowly subsided and the general escorted Eleanor back toward the school, the spell was broken. The first to approach was Principal Davison. His face was pale, his expensive suit suddenly looking cheap and ill-fitting. The arrogance had been stripped away, leaving behind a raw, humbled shame. "Miss Vance." "Eleanor," he stammered, his voice cracking. There are no words. What I said to you, my behavior, it was inexcusable. I am so sorry." Next came Kyle. Tears carved clean tracks through the adolescent grime on his face. He stood before her, unable to meet her eyes, the image of the spilled purple smoothie burning in his mind. "Ma'am," he choked out. "What I did, what I said. It was the cruelest thing I've ever done. I'm sorry. Your uniform, it's not a costume. I see that now." Eleanor looked from the principal to the boy. Her expression was not one of anger or triumph, but of a deep, quiet sadness. She placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "I wear this," she said, her voice clear and steady for all nearby to hear, "for the ones who can't. For the brothers I lost." She then looked at Davison. "Real respect isn't something you give only after you see the medals and the helicopter. It's the kindness you choose to offer when you know nothing at all. It's the choice not to hurt someone just because they are different." The Black Hawk departed as powerfully as it had arrived, its rotors washing over the field one last time before it climbed into the afternoon sky and disappeared. But its impact remained, etched into the soul of Lincoln High. The next day, a new elective was announced, a seminar on modern military history and veteran affairs. The hashtag Sergeant Granny hashtag was flooded with apologies and replaced by hashtag Heroes Among Us and hashtag Respect Our Elders. When Eleanor Vance returned to the library for her volunteer shift, she wore a simple cardigan and slacks. But she was no longer invisible. As she walked through the halls, students didn't whisper or stare. They nodded. They smiled. Some even came up to her, not to ask about the battle, but to ask about the books she was reading, or to simply say, "Good morning, Ms. Vance. It's an honor to have you here." We walk past heroes every day, their stories hidden behind quiet eyes and humble clothes. We judge, we dismiss, we mock what we don't understand. How many stories have we missed? How much greatness have we overlooked? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Please, comment with respect. If this story moved you, show your support by liking, sharing, and subscribing. We'll see you in the next one.